Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot, as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. The forest air, thick with the tang of pine and the musk of the damp earth, filled Ilara's lungs as she patrolled the edge of Shadow Creek's territory. Her well-worn boots moved silently across the woodland floor. A crisp breeze hinted at a coming autumnal tempest. The canopy above, a breathtaking tapestry of dying emerald and brilliant gold, usually brought her solace. But tonight, it was merely a scenic backdrop to her churning unease. "Anything?" she murmured, her voice scarcely louder than the whisper of leaves. Liam, her second, materialized from the undergrowth, his dark gaze sweeping the trees. "Nothing, Ilara. Just the usual deer runs. No sign of them," she breathed, the word dripping with animosity. Northwood. The very sound left a foul taste in her mouth. A familiar heat coiled in her stomach, a sensation she knew intimately. Northwood, and its alpha, Zev. The mere thought of him made her canines ache. She halted at the boundary marker, an ancient oak split by lightning, its scarred bole a stark testament to nature's untamed might, and the raw power of packs. Shadow Creek, her haven, small but formidable, nestled deep within these woods. Northwood, vast and sprawling, their land bordering hers for generations, a perennial source of conflict. Ilara brushed her palm against the rough bark, her eyes fixed on the Northwood side. "They're growing brazen," she breathed, more to herself than Liam. "I can feel it, that infuriating presence." Liam shuffled, apprehension in his posture. "Alpha Zev has been uncharacteristically quiet of late. Border patrols have been scaled back." "Silence doesn't equate to innocence," Ilara retorted, her eyes flashing with emerald fire. "It signifies planning. It's all he ever does." A gust of wind surged through the trees, carrying the faintest ghost of wood smoke, and something else a distinct Northwood signature. Ilara's nostrils flared, drinking the air. "He's near," she growled. "Too near." She closed her eyes, and an unwanted memory clawed its way to the surface. The first time she'd encountered Zev. A border parley, a strained affair conducted in a neutral clearing, equidistant from both territories. Barely 20, freshly appointed as Shadow Creek's representative following her father's sudden passing. She had entered that clearing with her chin raised, determined to assert her pack's interests. And then she'd seen him. Zev. Even then, scarcely older, he radiated an authority that was both captivating and deeply irritating. Broad-shouldered, with a jaw hewn from granite, and eyes the color of a storm-swept sea. He had stood there, flanked by his advisors, his expression bordering on casual arrogance. The negotiation had dissolved into chaos from the first word. Every phrase Zev uttered seemed calculated to antagonize her, to belittle her status. He disputed every point she raised, dismissed her worries with a patronizing smile, and generally behaved as if Shadow Creek was nothing more than an insignificant speck on his vast domain. "You're being unreasonable, Ilara," he'd said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that sent a shiver crawling down her spine, though not a pleasant one. "These are ancestral hunting grounds. Your pack has no valid claim." "Ancestral grounds for poaching, you mean," she'd snapped back, her voice trembling with barely controlled fury. "Northwood has been violating our territory for years. We will no longer endure it." His smile deepened, a predatory gleam igniting in his eyes. Such spirit, he murmured. It's almost charming. Charming? The sheer gall. She had yearned to leap across the space and rake her claws across his face. Instead, she clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms, and somehow managed to maintain a facade of composure. The meeting had ended in stalemate, both sides intractable. As she had stormed away, Zev's mocking laughter echoing in her ears, she had vowed never to share the same space as that cur. She opened her eyes, the memory fading, leaving behind a lingering residue of resentment and rage. Zev. He had always been her nemesis, her adversary, the one individual who could reliably provoke her and shatter her self-control. Ilara? Liam's voice sliced through her thoughts. Are you all right? She shook her head, striving to clear the fog of past grievances. I'm fine, she said, her tone sharper than intended, just on edge. She pivoted and headed back towards the heart of Shadow Creek territory, Liam close behind. The scent of Northwood still lingered in the air, a persistent reminder of the looming threat. As she walked, she couldn't quell the sensation that something was about to erupt. The fragile accord between Shadow Creek and Northwood was about to shatter completely. And Zev was the epicenter. She knew, deep down, that their inevitable clash would be a baptism by fire. He was arrogant, exasperating, and everything she loathed. Yet, as she considered him, a strange, unwanted warmth flickered within her. It was a heat she couldn't comprehend, a heat she refused to acknowledge. But it persisted, a shadow of something else, something far more complex than simple animosity. Back at the pack house, a robust log structure that had sheltered Shadow Creek for generations, Ilara found herself gazing out the window, watching the wind thrash through the trees. The pack members were engaged in their evening rituals, preparing for the night's hunt, caring for the younger pups. She was expected to reassure them, to project an aura of strength and unwavering confidence. But all she felt was a gnawing sense of foreboding. Sarah, one of the elders, approached her, concern etched into her face. "You're troubled, Ilara," she observed, her voice soft yet unwavering. "I can see it in your eyes." Ilara sighed, the sound heavy with weariness. "It's Zev," she confessed. "I feel like he's circling, waiting for a moment of weakness." Sarah nodded slowly, her expression somber. "He's a powerful alpha," she acknowledged. "And Northwood is formidable. But Shadow Creek is resilient. We've weathered worse storms." "I know," Ilara responded. "But this feels different. It feels personal." Sarah placed a hand on Ilara's arm, her touch surprisingly firm. "Don't allow your animosity to cloud your judgment, Ilara," she warned. "Hatred is a heavy burden. It can obscure the truth and leave you vulnerable." Ilara met Sarah's gaze, her own troubled. "But he's inflicted so much pain on us," she protested. "He's seized our land, harassed our hunters, undermined our customs. How can I not harbor bitterness?" "Hate him if you must," Sarah countered, "but don't let it consume you. Remember what you are fighting for. Remember your pack. Remember Shadow Creek." Ilara nodded, her resolve solidifying. Sarah was right. She couldn't allow her personal feelings to compromise her judgment. She bore a responsibility to her pack, a duty to defend them from any threat, including Zev. She straightened her spine, her eyes narrowing with determination. "I won't," she affirmed, her voice firm. "I won't allow him to triumph." As darkness descended, draping long shadows across the forest, Ilara prepared for the night patrol. The wind howled through the trees, a mournful cry that seemed to echo her own internal conflict. She strapped on her weapons, verified her equipment, and assembled her patrol team. As they melted into the darkness, Ilara's senses were heightened. Every rustle of foliage, every snap of a twig, sent a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew that Zev could be anywhere, observing, biding his time. And she knew that whatever was brewing, it would alter everything. The delicate peace, the simmering hatred, the unspoken longings, all of it was poised to reach a breaking point. And she carried a sinking premonition that she wasn't prepared for it. The binding the glade throbbed with the moon's potent magic. Liquid moonlight spilled through the leaves, bathing the Shadow Creek pack in an otherworldly glow. Ilara stood sentinel beside Elder Rowan, inhaling the earthy aroma of pine needles and rich soil. The full moon ritual, a night for unity, for bolstering strength, for reinforcing their pack ties, was underway. Yet, an unsettling premonition prickled her senses, a sour note amidst the clearing's usual harmony. Rowan, his aged face, a tapestry woven by years of experience, lifted his hands. A deep, sonorous chant arose, its intensity swelling like a gathering storm. Ilara closed her eyes, concentrating on the lunar tug, the surge of energy coursing through her. She welcomed its cleansing power, its ability to center her. Then, reality shattered, not with a violent eruption, but with a silent, invisible shockwave that swept through the clearing. The chanting sputtered, choked by startled cries. The silver light fractured, scattering like shattered glass. A jolt ripped through Ilara, a searing brand blooming within her chest, stealing her breath. She gasped, clutching at her sternum, her knees threatening to give way. All around, pack members crumpled, hands clamped to their heads, their faces etched with torment. Rowan, however, remained upright, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and chilling comprehension. What was that?" she croaked, her voice hoarse. Rowan didn't immediately respond, his gaze fixated on some unseen horizon. Finally he turned, his tone hushed. "The bondit's been forged." "Bond?" What did he mean? Ilara's mind struggled to process his words, the relentless pain obscuring her thoughts. She scanned the clearing frantically, seeking answers, seeking the source. And then she saw him. Zev stood poised at the edge of the clearing, shrouded in shadows, clutching his chest. His face was ashen, his habitual arrogance stripped away, replaced by raw, unfiltered suffering. Their eyes locked across the divide, a silent electric current arcing between them. In that instant, Ilara understood. This wasn't just any bond, it was a link between them. The ache intensified, a suffocating pressure that squeezed the air from her lungs. She wanted to scream, to fight, to sever this invisible tether. Zev appeared equally aghast, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and something indecipherable. "Rowan, what have you unleashed?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. Rowan shook his head slowly. "I didn't instigate this, Ilara. This was not my design. The Magicid is ancient, fickle. It chose you, chose us, chose him." Ilara spat the words like poison. "I'd sooner be chained to a badger with rabies." Zev visibly winced, his expression hardening. He stalked out of the shadows, closing the distance between them. "Believe me, Meadowlight, the sentiment is entirely reciprocal. I'd prefer a connection with a particularly noxious polecat. Then why are you here? Ilara demanded, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. Do you imagine I had a choice? Zev retorted, halting mere feet from her. His eyes, usually dancing with sardonic amusement, now burned with a pain that mirrored her own. Each step I take away from this accursed place feels like being torn in two. I'm bound to you, Ilara, as you are to me. Ilara recoiled as if struck. The truth of his words slammed into her like a physical blow. She tried to retreat, to escape the suffocating proximity, but a searing lance of pain shot through her chest, halting her. She gasped, clutching herself. Don't, Zev gritted out, his voice strained. Don't move further away. It only intensifies the torment. The sheer absurdity threatened to overwhelm her. Ilara Meadowlight, Alpha of Shadow Creek, yoked to her most loathed adversary, the insufferable Zev Northwood. It was a waking nightmare. There must be a way to dissolve this, she breathed, her voice a bare whisper. Rowan advanced, his face grim. Perhaps, but it will not be easily achieved. This sort of magic is stubbornly resistant to severance. It demands a sacrifice, a pact that outweighs the present bond. What manner of sacrifice? Ilara pressed, her eyes narrowed. Rowan hesitated, his gaze flickering between Ilara and Zev. A profound union, a merging of your pacts, a sharing of Palia marriage. The word hung in the air, a foreboding now. Marriage. The notion was so abhorrent, so unthinkable, that a wave of nausea crested within Ilara. She glanced at Zev, whose face was a study in disbelief. She knew he felt the purrs. Same revulsion. Absolutely not, she stated, her voice unwavering despite the persistent ache. There is no conceivable scenario in which I would wed him. Zev nodded, his jaw clenched. Seconded. I would gladly spend eternity shoveling manure before being shackled to you, Meadowlight. Then you both willingly embrace this suffering? Rowan asked softly, his eyes brimming with ancient understanding. Ilara spared a look at Zev. His face was drawn, etched with discomfort. She knew she presented a similar sight. The prospect of living like this, perpetually tethered to him, constantly assailed by his presence, was intolerable. But the alternative there must be another path, she pleaded, her voice laced with desperation. Rowan sighed. Perhaps. But time is not on your side. The longer this bond persists, the more deeply entrenched it becomes, and the more arduous its severing will prove. He regarded them both, his expression unreadable. The choice, as always, rests with you. Ilara locked gazes with Zev, her heart hammering against her ribs. He returned her stare, his eyes reflecting a blend of defiance and grudging awareness. They were enemies, undeniably, but they were also now linked, and somehow she sensed that their destinies were entwined in a way she never could have predicted. Unrest and uncertainty. The floorboards of Ilara's cabin groaned under her restless steps, the faint scent of pine and loam, a counterpoint to her inner turmoil. The memory of moon-kissed nights still clung to the air as she pivoted to face Lysandra, perched on the edge of the threadbare armchair, her usual effervescence dampened by worry. It's far worse than we imagined, Lise. Incalculably so. She raked her fingers through her unruly hair, the silvery strands catching the dawn's faint glow. This binding, it's not a mere magical inconvenience. It's a brutal constriction, a torturous tether that chains me to him. Lysandra's brow creased with concern. Walk me through this again, slowly, leaving out the part where the alpha needs to be restrained. Ilara exhaled, struggling to marshal her thoughts. Rowan said that severing it completely requires a unification, a true merging. Think wedlock. The word tasted like ash on her tongue. Lysandra's intake of breath was sharp. Marriage? To Zev? Northwood? Ilara, you'd sooner swallow hemlock. A mirthless chuckle escaped Ilara, preaching to the choir. But that's not even the crux of it. The longer this connection endures, the more enmeshed we become. Rowan warned that the agony will intensify. Our powers, they'll start to intermingle. Eventually, we'll be crippled without proximity. Lysandra rose. Her playful demeanor vanished. Late. So, are you saying your choices boil down to marrying your nemesis, or a slow, agonizing decline? Ilara nodded, the crushing weight of the impossible choice settling upon her shoulders. Precisely, and the Pax. They're oblivious to the specifics, yet they sense the disturbance, the palpable tension. They know something transpired last night. Lysandra clasped Ilara's arm, her expression softening with empathy. We'll unravel this, Ilara. We always do. There has to be an alternative. We'll delve into every incantation, every forgotten rite, every piece of folklore if we have to. We won't allow you to be strong-armed into this. Ilara offered a wan smile, buoyed by her friend's unwavering faith. Thanks, Lise. I needed to hear that. Though the odds seemed insurmountable, Lysandra's conviction was a beacon amidst the swirling storm. Meanwhile, within the Northwood territory, Zev confronted Garrick and Counselor Bram in the war room. Strategic maps, typically the focal point of their gatherings, lay undisturbed on the large table, overshadowed by a heavy quiet. The mechanics of the ritual are intricate, Zev began, his tone strained. However, the outcome is plain. I am bound to Alpha Metallite. Counselor Bram, a veteran wolf whose gaze reflected countless skirmishes, scoffed dismissively. Bound? What in the spirit of the great wolf are you babbling about, Zev? Bound how? Garrick, always pragmatic, observed in silence, his gaze piercing and analytical. Zev's jaw tightened. Magically entwined. Our vital energies are interwoven. Prolonged separation induces torment, enfeeblement. Bram's skepticism deepened into outright disbelief. And you anticipate us swallowing this fabrication? After centuries of conflict with Shadow Creek, you suddenly profess a magical link to their alpha? Zev slammed his fist against the table, the force sending a tremor through the maps. Believe what you wish, Bram, but it is the truth, and it impacts us all. If I am weakened, Northwood suffers. And so, consequently, does Shadow Creek. Garrick finally broke his silence, his tone calm yet resolute. What are the ramifications, Zev? What does this binding entail for the Pax? Zev hesitated, loath to expose the full extent of their predicament. It implies we must uncover a solution, a means to dissolve the connection. Until then, we must preserve a semblance of order. Avert any impetuous actions. Bram narrowed his eyes with suspicion. Impetuous actions? Are you advocating a ceasefire with Shadow Creek? After all they have inflicted upon us? Zev sighed, the burden of leadership weighing heavily. I am advocating for the preservation of our pack, Bram. My personal sentiments are immaterial. We must comprehend the nature of this binding and discover a method to break it. And that might necessitate collaboration. As the Alpha and his advisors debated, whispers raced through both Shadow Creek and Northwood like wildfire. The pack members felt an odd energy, a palpable tension vibrating between the two territories. Rumors, proliferated. The Alphas were locked in mortal combat. The Alphas had forged a clandestine agreement. A new menace loomed, demanding unity. Fear and uncertainty blossomed, nurtured by generations of deeply ingrained mistrust. In Shadow Creek, younger wolves pressed their elders for explanations. Why had patrols cough doubled overnight? Why were the border enchantments being reinforced? The elders, tight-lipped and uneasy, offered only vague assurances, doing little to quell the growing trepidation. Within Northwood, a similar reaction unfolded, though tinged with a different flavor. Suspicion and mistrust. They regarded their alpha with doubt. Was this some elaborate ruse? A maneuver to cripple their defenses and deliver them into the clutches of Shadow Creek? The whispers intensified, verging on hysteria, threatening to spiral into rebellion. The responsibility of leadership bore down on Ilara and Zev. They were tasked with not only resolving their impossible predicament, but also preventing their packs from self-destruction in the process. This forced alliance, forged by magic and inflamed by animosity, threatened to engulf everything in its wake. The storm was gathering, and neither alpha knew how to navigate its fury. Forced proximity, the wind clawed at Ilara, tangling strands of her hair as she stood sentinel at the meeting place. The ancient oak, its boughs twisted like arthritic fingers, demarcating the Shadow Creek border from Northwood's domain. The scent of resin and loam, typically a balm, did little to soothe her simmering fury. Zev Northwood was late. Predictable, really. He likely believed he could saunter in whenever the mood struck, playing the devastatingly attractive Woodsman King. When he finally materialized from the dense thicket, a silent cadre of claw, guards flanking him, Ilara's teeth ground together. He possessed that infuriating, fluid movement, dark hair shadowing his brow, eyes like polished obsidian catching the light as they locked onto hers. With a clipped gesture, he dismissed his entourage and approached alone. "Meadowlight," he greeted, his voice a gravelly murmur that vibrated through her. Punctuality, a surprise these days. "Spare me the niceties, Northwood," Ilara retorted, folding her arms tight across her chest. "Let's just figure out how to dissolve this ridiculous attachment. The sooner, the better." A sardonic quirk lifted the corner of Zev's mouth. "So eager to be rid of me. I'm crushed." He feigned offense, hand over his heart. Ilara simply rolled her eyes. "Try not to flatter yourself. I have better uses for my time than trading jabs with you." She indicated the tangled trees behind him. "Where will this bonding ritual take place?" "Your opulent pack house, no doubt, brimming with dusty tomes and sage advisors, ready to wave their hands and solve our little predicament." Acerbic wit laced every syllable. Zev's amusement vanished. "My pack house is irrelevant. The abandoned cabin near Whispering Falls. Neutral territory, away from curious eyes." The cabin was a wreck, its wood bleached gray by sun and neglect. Inside, dust motes pirouetted in the narrow beams of sunlight stabbing through the boarded-up gaps. A single, precarious table occupied the center of the space, flanked by chairs that appeared equally unstable. Ilara's expression soured. "How inviting," she commented dryly. Ignoring her, Zev produced a collection of time-worn scrolls and leather-bound codices from a gow. Satchel. "The most exhaustive texts I could locate on magical bindings. We start here." For hours they were lost in the brittle pages, the hushed stillness punctuated by the crinkle of parchment and their infrequent sighs of frustration. Ilara found herself unexpectedly captivated, her mind a whirlwind as she grappled with archaic runes and forgotten language. Zev, she begrudgingly conceded, was equally skilled, his keen intellect slicing through the text's complexities with impressive speed. Their opposing natures, however, complicated everything. Zev was meticulous, painstakingly absorbing every word. Ilara favored skimming, searching for critical phrases and patterns. "You're rushing," Zev would pronounce, brow furrowed in concentration. "You'll overlook something vital." "And you're dawdling," Ilara would shoot back. "We'll be entombed here at this rate." Tension crackled in the confined space. Each accidental graze of skin, each momentary glance, delivered a shock of awareness, a stark reminder of the unwanted connection that shackled them. As twilight bled across the cabin floor, painting elongated shadows, they were no closer to a solution. Nothing alluded to a binding like theirs. No straightforward answer. Disappointment swelled. "This is futile," Ilara declared, pushing the scrolls away in disgust. "A complete waste." Zev raked a hand through his dark hair, weariness etched into his features. "We can't concede defeat. There has to be something." "Maybe there isn't," Ilara burst out, rising. "Maybe we're stuck this way, permanently." The thought triggered a ripple of panic. She couldn't be chained to Zev Northwood, not for a minute, let alone forever. "Don't say that," Zev cautioned, his voice tinged with warning. "We will find a way out." He stood, diminishing the distance between them. Ilara recoiled instinctively, heart hammering. His presence was overwhelming, the scent of wood smoke and pine prickling her senses. She loathed her awareness of him, the way her body responded to his nearness. "We need to comprehend this bond," he stated, eyes fixed on hers. "Understand its parameters, its strengths, its weaknesses." "And how do you propose we do that?" Ilara asked, her voice a mere breath. "By testing it," he responded, his gaze unblinking. "By pushing it until it breaks." Before she could formulate a reply, Zev pivoted and strode toward the cabin door. "I'm going for a run," he announced without a backward glance. "I need to clear my head." Ilara watched him disappear, her thoughts a jumbled mess. Test the bond? What did that even entail? One certainty prevailed. She harbored no trust for Zev Northwood, not an iota. An hour drifted by. Ilara remained inside the cabin, pacing with mounting agitation. The silence was absolute, save for the groaning timbers of the structure and the distant susurrus of whispering falls. As dusk deepened, a peculiar sensation enveloped her, a muted ache in her chest, an escalating sense of disquiet. She initially dismissed it, attributing it to stress and exhaustion. But the sensation magnified, morphing into a sharp, searing pain that constricted her breathing. Clutching her chest, she gasped for air. What was befalling her? A sudden wave of vertigo overwhelmed her, and she stumbled, collapsing against the table. The scrolls cascaded to the floor as the room swam. She squeezed her eyes shut, battling the agony, but it was relentless. It felt as if her very essence was being drained. Just as she thought she would succumb, the cabin door crashed open, and Zev hurtled inside, his face ashen and twisted in anguish. He staggered toward her, his hand pressed against his own chest. "Ilara," he choked out, his voice ragged. "What's happening?" I don't know," she managed, her voice faint. "It feels like I'm fading." Zev reached her, his hands trembling as he framed her face. His touch sent a jolt of energy through her, a flicker of relief against the consuming pain. "It's the bond," he said, his eyes wide with alarm. "It's reacting to our separation. The greater the distance, the weaker we become. Ilara stared, comprehension piercing through the haze. He had been experimenting with the bond, driving it to the edge, and she had borne the brunt. Fury surged, momentarily eclipsing the pain. "You did this deliberately," she accused, her voice raw. "You used me as some kind of guinea pig." Zev's expression was a canvas of guilt and desperation. "I didn't realize it would be this severe," he pleaded. "I swear, Ilara, I didn't want to hurt you." He drew her close, his arms enfolding her in a tight embrace. Ilara yearned to shove him away, to unleash her frustration at his reckless actions. But as his body met hers, she felt the pain recede, the dizziness subside. The connection between them, the unwelcome aggravating bond, was also her tether to existence. Forced proximity. It wasn't just a concept anymore. It was a question of survival. Ensnared together, tethered by magic and circumstance, Ilara and Zev confronted a chilling truth. Their destinies were now intertwined, and their antagonism was a luxury they could no longer indulge. A glimmer of respect leaf litter whispered under Ilara's paws as she and Anya circled each other, the morning's chill moisture beating on their pelts. Amber eyes, sharp with focus, mirrored Ilara's every shift. A fade to the left, a sudden charge to the right, became a dance of silver fur and gnashing teeth. Anya, nimble as a breeze, evaded the strike. Claws extended, poised to retaliate. "Quicker, Ilara," Anya's low growl cut through the still air. "A true rogue won't politely offer you time to plan." Ilara grinned, the invigorating rush of combat momentarily eclipsing the memory of her disastrous encounter with Zev. "Easy for you to say, Swiftfoot. You've had ages to perfect your footwork." A snort, a plume of vapor blooming in the crisp air, was Anya's reply. Excuses. Again. They circled anew, the whisper of leaves their only accompaniment, besides the rasp of their breath. Ilara honed her focus, banishing the infuriating smirk of Zev from her mind. She had to be ready, the pack depended on it. This time, she aimed for Anya's side. Anticipating the assault, Anya pirouetted to meet her head-on. The impact reverberated, sending both warriors staggering. Then, a primal, shattering roar ripped through the quiet dawn. A hulking wolf erupted from the thicket, scars mapping its course, patchy fur, feral hunger burning in its eyes. An exile, driven from its lands, desperate and deadly. Ilara's hesitation lasted a heartbeat, a fatal error. The rogue lunged, fangs bared, targeting her throat. With lightning reflexes, Anya hurled herself into the path of the attack, becoming a shield. The rogue slammed into Anya, sending her tumbling, but buying Ilara precious seconds. Shifting instinctively, claws sheathed, she braced for battle. But the rogue was too quick, too consumed by rage. A clawed swipe tore across her shoulder, igniting a searing pain. She recoiled, momentarily stunned. Before she could recover, the rogue was upon her, pinning her to the damp earth. Desperate snarls tore from her throat as she struggled, but the rogue's weight was crushing. The fetid breath of the beast washed over her, its jaws closing. This was the end. A thunderous bellow split the air, vibrating through the ground. A shadow cannoned into the rogue, flinging it aside. Zev. He landed in a fluid shift, his eyes blazing with a raw intensity Ilara had never imagined. He was a tempest of fur and teeth, a force of nature unleashed. He tore into the rogue with a ferocity that staggered even Ilara, claws ripping, fangs tearing. Initially defiant, the rogue quickly crumbled under Zev's onslaught, whimpering and cowering before collapsing into a lifeless heap. Zev stood over the fallen beast, chest heaving, fur matted with crimson. He was pure predator, a being of honed instinct. Slowly, his gaze swept to Ilara. The savage fury in his eyes softened, replaced by something indecipherable. Concern? Relief? He approached cautiously, almost tentatively. "Ilara," he rumbled, his voice rough-edged. "Are you injured?" She pushed herself upright, suppressing a groan. "I'm fine," she snapped, her voice betraying her bravado. Far from it. She felt shaken, exposed, and acutely aware of Zev's nearness. He stood too close, his scent too potent, his presence too overwhelming. Fur ruffled, eyes narrowed, Anya scrambled to her feet, watching Zev with open suspicion. "What brings you here, Northwood?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Sensing Ilara's distress, perhaps?" Zev ignored Anya, his focus riveted on Ilara. His eyes traced her face, her form, searching for wounds. "Let me see your shoulder," he instructed, reaching out. Ilara flinched. "I said I'm fine." "You're bleeding," he stated, his tone insistent. "Let me help." "I don't require assistance," she retorted, pride clashing with the undeniable need for aid. The warm trickle of blood down her fur was becoming difficult to ignore. Zev's jaw tightened. He knew her intractable nature, her resistance to accepting help, even when desperate. He also knew he couldn't abandon her in this state. The bond wouldn't permit it, and neither would his something he refused to examine too closely. Ignoring her protests, he stepped forward and gently probed her injured shoulder. His touch, surprisingly delicate, assessed the injury with practiced ease. Ilara gasped, a sharp intake of breath. "It's superficial," he murmured, his voice soothing. "But it needs cleaning." He turned to Anya. "Take her back to Shadow Creek. I will gather herbs." Anya hesitated, her gaze flickering between Ilara and Zev. Distrust warred with a recognition of the situation's urgency. With a reluctant nod, she offered Ilara support. As Anya helped her walk, Ilara risked a glance back. Zev watched them depart, his expression a mystery. For the first time she glimpsed something beyond arrogance in his eyes. Concern, yes, but something deeper. A flicker of respect. The notion stunned her. She had always painted Zev as her nemesis, a rival, someone to fear and distrust. But in that moment, coated in blood, having risked his life to protect hers, she viewed him differently. Still arrogant, still infuriating, but undeniably strong, protective and capable. The realization was unsettling. She didn't want to respect Zev. She refused to see him as anything but an adversary. Yet, she couldn't dismiss the truth of what she had witnessed. He had saved her, and for that, she was in his debt. A debt she was unsure she wished to pay. As they retreated, the image of Zev seared itself into her mind. The raw intensity in his gaze, the power in his movements, the surprising gentleness of his touch. He was an enigma, a paradox, and a terrifying realization began to dawn. Perhaps she had underestimated him. Perhaps Zev Northwood held more than she had ever suspected. The bond between them pulsed, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in their dynamic. Hatred still simmered, but a new ingredient had been added. A spark of respect, a hint of understanding, and a profound sense of disquiet. The truce the dread coiled tight in Ilara's chest hadn't eased since the assault. If anything, witnessing Zev's concerned emotion she'd never associated with him only deepened the roiling unease within. She sought out Elder Rowan in the sunstone glade, where sunlight filtered through the canopy, gilding the ancient stones. A low thrum of energy permeated the air, a stark contrast to the tempest raging inside her. Rowan sat in lotus position atop the largest stone, eyes shut, hands resting gently on his knees. "Ilara," he intoned, without opening his eyes. The very ground trembles with disquiet. Kneeling before him, she found scant comfort in the stone's coolness against her skin. The attack had portended something greater, didn't it? Rowan's gaze met hers, holding wells of ageless wisdom. A harbinger, yes, but also a doorway. A doorway? She scoffed, the word laced with bitterness. To more bloodshed? To dependence on Zev? I fail to see the benefit. Rowan released a breath that sounded like wind sighing through ancient boughs. Your hostility clouds your vision, child. Representatives from both packs have gathered. They offer a cessation of hostilities. Ilara's head shot up. A cessation? With Shadow Creek? After all that's passed? For the welfare of our people, Ilara, the rogue incursions are worsening. Alone, neither of us can withstand the onslaught. Together we might stand a chance. Together? With Zev? He'd sooner watch Meadowlight crumble to dust. He is tethered to you now, Ilara. His fate entwines with yours. Whether welcome or not, you must learn to coexist. More than that, you must learn to act. In concert. Rowan's stare was unwavering, absolute. This cessation isn't optional, Ilara. It is paramount. The Council is in agreement. You will parley with Zev, define the terms, and discover a way to collaborate. Meadowlight's safety hinges upon it. The weight in Ilara's chest swelled, an oppressive burden of responsibility. Her gaze implored Rowan for another way, but his ageless eyes offered only steadfast resolve. Across the territory, within Shadow Creek's heart, Zev stalked back and forth before the Northwood Council. Skepticism and animosity hung heavy in the air of the chamber. Councillor Bram, a massive wolf with a perpetual snarl twisting his features, leaned forward, his voice a guttural rumble. A cessation? With Meadowlight. Are you suggesting we parley with our sworn adversaries, Zev, after generations of strife? Zev ceased his pacing, pivoting to face the assembly. He felt the pull of the bond, a persistent throb that intensified the longer he remained from Ilara. The physical repercussions of resisting the bond's yearning made concentration a trial. Clenching his fists, he fought to ignore the ache. The guilt stemming from his failed attempts to sever the connection gnawed at him. He was subjecting his pack to needless torment. The rogue incursions are mounting, Bram. Our sentinels are spread thin. We've suffered losses. We can ill afford to disregard the danger. And you believe Meadowlight will be an ally? They'll sink a dagger in our backs the instant we falter. Bram spat on the floor. They faced the same predicament, Zev countered, his voice taut. And they possess something we lack. He hesitated, reluctant to divulge the extent of his link to Ilara, but knew he had no alternative. Ilara and I were linked. What befalls one, befalls the other. A confluence. If we act in concert, we can exploit it to our advantage, foresee the rogue's maneuvers, safeguard our lands. A ripple of murmurs coursed through the council. Bram's sneer intensified. Linked? What manner of witchcraft is this? You've been ensnared, Zev. Meadowlight has beguiled you. That's preposterous, Zev retorted, his restraint fraying. This has nothing to do with Meadowlight. It concerns survival, protecting our pack. I'm not compromised. I'm deploying every tool at my disposal to fulfill my duty. And what tools are those, Zev? Zev? Bram challenged, rising to his full height. Consorting with the enemy? Sharing intelligence? Allowing her into your very thoughts? Enough! Elder Lyra's voice sliced through the tension. She arose from her position at the head of the table, her aged eyes still possessing a keen intensity. The council has rendered its judgment. We concur with the cessation. Zev, you will meet with Ilara and negotiate the terms. Bram, you will cease your accusations. This is not a debate. It is an order. Zev nodded, relief washing over him, swiftly followed by a renewed wave of apprehension. He had to confront Ilara, he had to collaborate with her, and he had to unearth a way to persuade her and himself that this cessation was the sole path forward. He knew that each passing moment away from her amplified the bond's strength. Its insistence. He could feel it now. A persistent tug, a magnetic force drawing him inexorably closer. It was a torment, and he knew, with a certainty that sent a chill down his spine, that it would only intensify. The parley was scheduled for the subsequent dawn, at the boundary between their territories, a place etched with the scars of years of clashes and mistrust. Ilara arrived first, her face a rigid mask of determination. She stood at the edge of the whispering woods, the ancient trees casting elongated, spectral shadows. The air hung still and oppressive, heavy with unspoken animosity. Zev materialized moments later, his eyes shadowed, his jaw clenched. He halted a few paces from her, the distance feeling simultaneously too intimate and impossibly vast. He appeared drained, Ilara noted with a flicker of involuntary concern. The bond must be exacting its toll on him, as well. So, Ilara began, shattering the silence, her voice sharp-edged. We're proceeding with this. We are, Zev responded, his voice a low timbre. For the sake of our packs. Don't feign concern for Meadowlight, Zev. I know you too well. And you know me so well, Ilara. Zev's lips curved into a mirthless smile. Then you know I invariably do what is required. Required for whom, Zev? For Shadow Creek? Or for your own ambitions? Zev recoiled, as if physically struck. This isn't about you, Ilara. Or me. It concerns survival. Our packs are vulnerable. The rogues grow in power. We must collaborate, like it or not. Ilara crossed her arms, her stare unwavering. And what conditions do you propose, Alpha Zev? Beer. Zev hesitated, then closed the distance between them, his voice dropping to a hushed tone. We share patrol routes. We exchange intelligence. We train together. We learn to fight as a unified force. Ilara scoffed. Train together? You expect me to reveal our strategies to your wolves? Grant you an advantage? And you think I desire to hand you an advantage, Ilara? This is not about advantages. It's about survival. If one of us succumbs, the other will follow. He paused, his eyes searching hers. We're linked, Ilara. Whether we welcome it or not, we're in this inextricably. Ilara studied him, truly studied him, and saw not the arrogant, entitled Alpha she'd always known, but a weary sovereign burdened by responsibility, striving to safeguard his people. A sovereign who, irrespective of their history, was willing to set aside his pride for the common good. A sovereign who was bonded to Kekelen. Her, she sighed, the fight draining out of her. Fine, she relented, her voice barely audible. We have a cessation. Zev nodded, a spark of relief flickering in his eyes. Good, because if we fail, we are both doomed. The cessation remained tenuous, a slender thread stretched between two warring factions, but it existed, and Ilara and Zev, bound by fate and circumstance, had no choice but to cling to it. Joint patrol. The forest air felt stifling, thick with unspoken grievances. Ilara marched ahead, the familiar aroma of pine and loam offering scant solace to her raw nerves. Behind her, Zev's steady gait echoed, each footfall a deliberate reminder of their unwelcome alliance. She tightened her grip on the silver-etched dagger, the cool metal a meager balm against the simmering frustration. "You know," Zev began, his tone disarmingly casual, "a modicum of feigned enjoyment wouldn't kill you." Ilara halted abruptly, pivoting to face him. "Enjoyment? Zev, you're about as welcome as a dentist's drill without numbing." An eyebrow arched, a spark of amusement glinting in his verdant eyes. "Harsh. And here I was, optimistic about our rapport. I even contemplated serenading you with a ditty." "Spare me the theatrics," Ilara snapped, resuming her trek. "Concentrate on the patrol. Perhaps, just perhaps, we can complete this without bloodshed. Ideally, yours." Zev chuckled, a low vibration that resonated uncomfortably within her. The bond between them pulsed, a subtle, persistent thrum mirroring the inner turmoil. She loathed him, truly. Yet, the undeniable pull, it was relentless torment. Their patrol resumed, the only sounds the whisper of leaves and the occasional bird song. Tension hung higher in the air, a palpable shroud dampening the sunlight. Ilara surveyed their surroundings, senses heightened. The recent attack had shaken her pack, and she wouldn't lower her guard, particularly with Zev at her side. They reached the boundary, delineated by ancient, moss-covered stones. The atmosphere shifted, buzzing with a faint, disquieting energy. This very line had always been the flashpoint between their packs. A low growl shattered the silence. From the shadows materialized a young timberwood wolf, fur bristling, eyes narrowed in challenge. Scarcely Dada, more than a pup, he nonetheless radiated territorial aggression. "Looks like someone's trying to prove himself," Zev remarked, his voice turning hard. Ilara stepped forward, a growl rumbling in her chest. "This is Meadowlight land. Turn back now, whelp, before you're hurt." The pup lunged, jaws snapping. Ilara evaded the attack effortlessly, movements fluid and precise. She could subdue him easily, yet she hesitated. He was young, impetuous, but still one of Zev's pack. Zev moved then, with unexpected speed. He seized the pup by the scruff, hoisting him into the air. The wolf yelped in surprise and fear. "Enough," Zev commanded, his voice laced with authority. "This is no way to represent Shadow Creek. Go home and tell your alpha you overstepped." The pup, subdued and humiliated, whimpered before bolting back into the trees. Zev watched him vanish, his expression grim. "He's young," Ilara offered, breaking the silence. "He'll learn restraint." "He needs to," Zev countered, releasing a weary breath. "We can't afford further squabbles, not now." Their patrol continued, steps lighter now, the atmosphere easing. A few hours later, they encountered a small cluster of rogues, scavenging for sustenance near a stream. These were the organized, disciplined aggressors from Ma. The previous night, rather desperate wanderers driven by hunger. "Leave," Ilara commanded, her voice amplified by her alpha's command. "This is Meadowlight territory. Find sustenance elsewhere." The rogues hesitated, eyes flickering nervously between Ilara and Zev. They were outnumbered, outmatched, yet desperation lent them a degree of audacity. One snarled, lunging toward Ilara. Zev reacted instantly, morphing into his wolf form. A magnificent creature, his fur the color of a starless night, his eyes burning with fierce intelligence. He moved with astonishing swiftness, slamming the rogue off his feet with a powerful blow. Ilara shifted as well, her own wolf form sleek and silver. Together, they drove the rogues back, forcing them to flee into the depths of the forest. The skirmish was brief, brutal, and ultimately successful. Once the last rogue vanished, they returned to their human forms, breathing hard. Ilara leaned against a tree, muscles aching, heart pounding. "Not exactly a stroll in the park," Zev quipped, a wry smile gracing his lips. Ilara snorted derisively. "You call that a leisurely walk? Try refereeing a toddler free-for-all in a candy shop." Zev laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that took her by surprise. It was a warm, contagious sound, and for a moment, Ilara found herself joining in. The tension that had been building between them seemed to dissolve, replaced by a fleeting sense of shared purpose. "You know," Zev said, as the laughter faded. "For someone who claims to abhor my presence, you're a formidable ally in a brawl." Ilara rolled her eyes, but she couldn't quite suppress the subtle upturn of her lips. "Don't let it inflate your ego, Northwood. I simply wouldn't want you expiring on my watch." "Of course not," Zev replied, a playful glint in his eyes. "Wouldn't want to have to explain that to your pack." They resumed their patrol in a more relaxed quiet, the earlier friction replaced by a cautious respect. As dusk descended, painting long shadows across the landscape, they turned back toward their respective territories. "We should do this again," Zev suggested as they reached the boundary. Ilara raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Are you volunteering for punishment?" "Perhaps." Zev grinned. "Or perhaps I'm actually warming up to your company. Just a tad." Ilara scoffed, but offered no denial. The truth was, try as she might, she was beginning to perceive Zev through a different lens. He remained infuriating, still carried himself with an air of arrogance, but beneath the surface there was something more, something elusive. And that, she apprehended with a sinking sensation, was far more perilous than any rogue encounter. Beneath the surface, the frigid air clawed at Ilara as they trudged back toward the demarcation between their territories. The silence hummed, denser than the gathering twilight. Zev's features were gaunt, etched with a weariness that belied his age. He appeared diminished. Guilt snagged at Ilara. She'd registered the fallout from their botched ritual, its impact etched on him. "You all right?" she blurted, the question sharper than intended. A mirthless chuckle was his reply. "Worried, Meadowlight?" A sideways glance held a teasing spark, though it failed to ignite the exhaustion lurking beneath. Ilara's brow furrowed. "Don't inflate your ego. I just don't fancy you collapsing on the borderline. The paperwork alone." He halted, pivoting to face her squarely, as the wind worried at his raven hair, exposing the harsh planes of his face. "Is that it then, Ilara? Am I just an administrative headache to you?" The query wrong-footed her. She hadn't braced for such directness, a vulnerability that hung in the air between them. "What do you expect me to say, Zev? That I find you to be a charming, deeply misunderstood leader with a heart of pure gold? Would that be such an ordeal?" He closed the distance between them, encroaching upon her personal space. The composite scent of pine and something raw, almost feral, assaulted her senses. "To see me as something other than the opposition?" Ilara stood firm, refusing to yield ground. "You've hardly provided cause to view you otherwise." "Haven't I?" A flicker of amusement danced on his lips. Or have you merely opted to remain blind? A tide of frustration rose within her. He was at it again, poking, prodding, forcing her to confront the uncomfortable. What's that supposed to signify? It signifies, Zev's tone softened, that you assume I relish this perpetual power play, that I thrive under the mantle of alpha. You imagine I bound out of bed each morning, eager to inflict misery on you and yours. He paused, scrutinizing her reaction. Do you genuinely hold that conviction, Ilara? The question lingered, heavy with implications. She had consistently framed Zev as the embodiment of everything she despised: presumption, entitlement, an unyielding lust for dominion. But now she perceived something more, a weariness that resonated with her own, a weight etched into his very being. I don't know, she confessed, the admission tasting like ash. Zev gave a slow nod. Leadership isn't some game, Ilara. It's not about flexing and dominating. It's about facing untenable choices, bearing your pack's burdens, knowing every breath you take can save or condemn someone. His gaze drifted towards the deepening forest. My father, he made it appear seamless. But it isn't. It erodes you, piece by piece. Ilara watched, surprised by this unexpected glimpse behind the mask. She had operated under the belief that Zev had simply inherited the throne, effortlessly slotting into his father's role. She hadn't conceived of the pressures, the pressure, expectations, the sheer, crushing weight. My mother, she whispered, her voice barely audible, always maintained that being alpha was a privilege. A gift, Zev snorted derisively. A gift wrapped in razor wire. My father expected perfection, unbending strength, unwavering resolve, strategic genius. He never acknowledged the toll. Turning his gaze back, eyes alight with raw honesty that almost stole her breath, he asked, "And you, Ilara? What were your parents' expectations?" Reluctance held her back. Much the same, I imagine. Protection of the pack, upholding our tradition, being strong. And were you? Zev pressed, sensing her disquiet. I attempted to be. Attempted? He pushed, noting her vulnerability. It wasn't always enough, she admitted, a thread of bitterness woven into the words. My parents, they nurtured a vision for the pack, a future they yearned to forge. And, at times, I wasn't the leader they imagined. Understanding flickered in Zev's features. It's a solitary space, isn't it? Shouldering the welfare of everyone around you when no one can grasp the burden. The air crackled with a silent kinship. Both were leaders, both weighed down by anticipation, both struggling to navigate the treacherous terrain of responsibility. A lone howl split the quiet, shattering the fragile moment. Zev tensed, his features hardening. The openness vanished, masked by the familiar Alpha Zev cray. Ooh. We should move on, he stated, his voice clipped. A border remains to be secured. He resumed his march, at a quicker pace. Ilara followed, the weight of their shared exchange heavy in her chest. She'd caught a glimpse of something genuine beneath Zev's calculated facade. A flicker of pain, a trace of solitude. The man concealed beneath the alpha, yet as they continued their patrol, the gulf between them appeared to widen. The ramparts were being rebuilt, brick by careful brick, and Ilara wondered if she had imagined the entire encounter. Perhaps it was a trick of the fading light, a brief moment of weakness. Or perhaps, just maybe, There existed more to Zev Northwood than she had ever permitted herself to see. Reaching a small open space, Zev halted Chow. Abruptly, his silhouette stark against the dying light, his shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. Unease stirred within Ilara. "Ilara?" he began, his voice strained and low. I need to tell you something." He paused, drawing in a deep breath. The air shimmered faintly around him, a visible manifestation of the magical link joining them. "Separation ritual," he pressed, his voice thick with contrition. "It wasn't entirely my doing." Ilara's heart began to hammer in her chest. She'd suspected something along those lines. "What are you saying?" Zev turned to face her, his eyes filled with anguish she'd never witnessed before. "I was desperate. I had to know if there was an escape, a method to sever this connection." He balled his hands into fists, knuckles stark white. "But I didn't foresee the repercussions. The pain, the wreckage it would unleash. On you, on both of us." Ilara stared, dumbfounded. He was admitting wrongdoing? Accepting responsibility? It was so incongruous. "I'm sorry, Ilara," he managed, his voice barely carrying. "I never wanted to cause you pain." Turning away, he fixed his gaze on the ground. I don't know what to do anymore. This bondit's changing me, causing me to experience feelings I don't desire." Lifting his head, his eyes met hers. "And I'm afraid of what it may transform me into." The naked sincerity in his regard cut through her armor. She beheld fear, uncertainty, the raw vulnerability he had fought so hard to conceal. In that instant, understanding dawned. Zev wasn't merely her rival. He was a man, grappling with his own demons, trapped by circumstances beyond his control, and she, unwillingly, was trapped alongside him. Hidden sanctuary curiosity, a persistent itch beneath her skin, propelled Ilara after Zev, despite her reservations. All morning he'd been withdrawn, a stark contrast to his usual commanding self. The failed ritual had exacted a price. A subtle tremor betrayed his unease, a vulnerability she'd never glimpsed before. An air of concealed purpose clung to him as he vanished into the dense woods bordering their lands. She justified her pursuit as concern, a need to ensure he wasn't orchestrating some rash retaliation. But honesty whispered she craved to unveil his secret. The undergrowth surrendered to her silent steps, a medley of decaying leaves and rich damp soil, the air laced with pine and an elusive sweetness, like meadow blossoms. The trees crowded, their branches entwined like grasping fingers, painting the ground with shifting, phantom shapes. Past familiar markers, he led her into an uncharted portion of the forest. Then she detected it, a child's tentative giggle, followed by a deeper, reassuring murmur. Slowing, she peered through the verdant screen. A clearing blossomed before her, kissed by sunlight filtering through the leaves. At its heart, a small, improvised training space had been carved from the wilderness. Tiny hurdles crafted from fallen timber, targets woven from supple branches suspended between boughs. And Zev was there, a stark contrast to the ruthless alpha she anticipated. He knelt, gentle, beside a girl barely 8, her wolf ears twitching with apprehension. Ilara recognized her. Ira Finch, orphaned in a rogue attack 2 years prior. Painfully timid, almost silent, she perpetually lingered at the fringes of the pack. "Easy now, Ember," Zev encouraged, his voice softer than Ilara imagined possible. "You've got this. Just a tiny shift. Feel the strength, Gather. Ira, or Ember as Zev called her, regarded him with hesitant, brimming eyes. "But I'm afraid," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustle of leaves. A genuine, unguarded smile illuminated Zev's features, transforming his face. "I know, but I'm here. Nothing will happen. Remember our breathing? Imagine the wolf. Let it come." He guided her through the familiar exercise, his hands firm and encouraging on her slight shoulders. Ember closed her eyes, brow knit in concentration. Gradually, she altered. Small hands sprouted fur, legs elongated, and a diminutive, uncertain wolf pup stood in her stead. A whimper escaped the pup, tail tucked low. Zev didn't press. He merely sat by her side, a silent bastion of reassurance. "There you are, Ember. Excellent. Now, a little trot, yes?" He coaxed her, encouraging her to explore her nascent form. There was no push for perfection, only celebration for each small triumph, each tentative stride. Ilara watched, captivated. This was a Zev she didn't know, a stranger to the alpha she'd grown to despise. He was different, exposed, empathetic. Then he caught sight of her. Ember, distracted by a darting butterfly, had strayed a few feet, granting Zev a clear view. His eyes widened, tenderness replaced by wary caution. "Ilara," he stated, his voice losing its earlier warmth. Ember, startled by the unfamiliar name, yelped and reverted, scurrying behind Zev, her eyes wide with alarm. "Who's that?" she murmured, clinging to his tunic. "It's all right, Ember," Zev soothed, his hand protectively on her back. "This is Alpha Ilara. She's a friend." Ilara entered the clearing, her gaze sweeping over the makeshift practice area, before settling back on Zev. "What is this?" she inquired, her voice carefully even. "This is nothing," Zev replied, his jaw taut. "A private matter." "It doesn't seem like nothing," Ilara countered, tilting her head. "It appears you're running a sanctuary for displaced pups." A flicker of anger sparked in Zev's eyes. "They need guidance," he snapped. "Their parents gave everything to protect the pack. Someone must care." "And that someone is you?" Ilara asked, surprised by the revelation. "Who else?" Zev retorted, his voice tinged with bitterness. "The pack is too consumed with power plays and turf wars to bother with orphaned pups." Ilara studied him, her gaze unwavering. She registered the fatigue etched into his face, the fine lines bracketing his mouth. He wasn't simply an alpha, he was a guardian, a protector of the defenseless. A surge of unexpected understanding washed through her. Leadership transcended dominance. It was about accountability, facing difficult choices, bearing burdens unseen by others. Ember struggles with fear, Ilara observed, her tone gentler. She requires support, help to master her wolf. She isn't alone, Zev muttered, his gaze glued to the earth. Ilara ignored the undercurrent. "You have a gift with her," she remarked, genuinely taken aback. "I didn't expect that of you." Zev scoffed. "Don't delude yourself, Ilara. I'm simply doing what must be done." Ilara, however, saw past the gruff veneer. She witnessed the genuine affection in his eyes when he looked at Ember, the patient grace in his touch. She perceived the weight of responsibility he carried, the unseen sacrifices he made. "Thank you," Ember whispered, peering from behind Zev. "For believing in me." Ilara offered a rare, authentic smile that lit her eyes. "You're welcome, Ember. You are courageous." She turned back to Zev, her expression serious. I will keep this to myself, she stated. I believe what you're doing is vital. Zev met her gaze, his eyes probing hers. For a fleeting instant, she detected a hint of something gratitude. Relief? Then the mask returned, the Alpha's cold, impenetrable shield. Don't misinterpret this, Ilara, he stated, his voice hard. This changes nothing between us. Yet, Ilara understood it did. She'd witnessed a facet of Zev hidden from everyone else, a facet that challenged her assumptions and forced her to reassess everything she thought she knew. The forced bond uniting them hadn't just linked their magic, it had stripped away artifice, revealing unexplored depths and surprising truths. And now, she couldn't simply walk away, not when she was only beginning to grasp the essence of Zev Northwood. Whispers of war, the metallic tang of blood hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the sweet scent of herbs emanating from Mara's makeshift infirmary. Ilara watched as Mara gently cleaned a deep gash on Liam's arm, her brow furrowed with concern. Liam, a usually boisterous warrior, lay pale and silent, the attack having clearly shaken him. This was no ordinary wolf, Ilara, Mara said softly, her voice barely a whisper above the crackling fire. The claw marks, they're too precise, too deliberate. Ilara knelt beside Liam, her gaze hardening. Deliberate how, Mara? Mara sighed, dabbing at the wound with a clean cloth. Like someone knew exactly where to strike to incapacitate, not kill. Like a trained fighter. Ilara's gut clenched. A trained fighter targeting pack members? The implications were terrifying. She rose, pacing restlessly. We need to increase patrols. I want eyes on every border, every shadow. Mara nodded, her gaze meeting Ilara's. I'm worried, Ilara. This is the third attack this week. Something is brewing, and it doesn't feel like a wild animal. As if summoned by their fears, Garrick strode into the clearing, his face grim. He moved with an uncharacteristic urgency, his usual stoicism replaced by a palpable tension. Zev wants to see you, Ilara, immediately. Ilara frowned. What's wrong? Garrick hesitated, his gaze flicking towards Liam before settling back on Ilara. They've had attacks too, similar to ours. A couple of their trackers were ambushed near the southern border. One is not going to make it. The air crackled with unspoken accusations. Ilara felt a familiar anger rising within her, directed at Zev, at Northwood, at the impossible situation they were all trapped in. He thinks we're behind this, doesn't he? Garrick offered a weary shrug. He's cautious, as are we. The attack started shortly after the failed severance ritual. Suspicion is natural. Natural, but devastating. The fragile truce they had forged was already crumbling under the weight of distrust. Ilara followed Garrick to the border, the tension thickening with every step. The air itself seemed to vibrate with unease. When they reached the meeting point, Zev was already there, pacing with the same restless energy Ilara felt. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were shadowed with exhaustion. He looked thinner, paler than she remembered. The bond, she realized with a jolt, was taking its toll on him too. 3 of my pack members attacked this week, Zev said, his voice tight with controlled fury. 1 dead. Yours too, I hear. Ilara met his gaze, her own anger simmering beneath the surface. Liam will live. Barely. And don't pretend you're not thinking what I'm thinking, Zev, that this is some kind of retaliation. Zev stopped pacing, his jaw clenching. Retaliation for what, Ilara? For trying to break a bond that should never have existed. Or for the constant skirmishes your pack initiates along the border? Skirmishes? Ilara scoffed. Those are patrols, Zev. Protecting our territory from whatever is lurking in the shadows. Just like you should be doing instead of pointing fingers. Zev took a step closer, his eyes blazing. Don't play innocent with me, Ilara. Your warriors are just as bloodthirsty as mine. Maybe more so. They would love nothing more than to see Northwood fall. Ilara's hand instinctively went to the hilt of her knife. And yours wouldn't? Don't flatter yourself, Zev. We have more pressing concerns than your pack's paranoia. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken accusations, each of them waiting for the other to make the first move. We need to find out who is doing this, Zev. Zev stated. The only way to do that is to work together. Ilara stared at him skeptically. Why should I believe you? Zev ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that Ilara found surprisingly disarming. Because if this escalates into a full-blown war, both our packs will be destroyed. This bond has proven that we are not as different as we believe. We both want to protect our people, and that's all that matters now. Ilara paused. All right, I will agree to work with Kra. You? But I am going to have my own people watching over you. Zev nodded grimly. Agreed. But this alliance is strictly for this investigation. Once we find whoever is responsible, this ends. Ilara's heart clenched at his words, but she nodded. Agreed. As Ilara returned to Shadow Creek, the whispers followed her like shadows. Whispers of betrayal, of sabotage, of a war that was already beginning in the minds of her pack members. She could feel their fear, their anger, their distrust radiating towards Northwood. Even some of her closest advisors were starting to question her judgment. Ilara, you cannot trust Zev. You know how ruthless he can be, said a member of her guard. She sighed heavily. I know, but we don't have a choice. If we don't find who is doing this soon, we are going to be at war. Later that evening, Ilara sat alone in her study, poring over maps of the territory. The flickering candlelight cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, amplifying her sense of unease. A soft knock on the door startled her. It was Mara. Can I come in? Ilara nodded, gesturing to a chair. Mara entered, carrying a steaming mug. Chamomile tea. You look like you could use it. Ilara took the mug gratefully, inhaling the calming aroma. Thanks, Mara. I don't know what I would do without you. Mara sat down, her expression serious. The pack is scared, Ilara. They're whispering about Northwood, about you, about the bond. Ilara sighed. I know. I can feel it. Mara reached out, taking Ilara's hand in hers. You have to be strong, Ilara. For them. Show them that you are in control, that you will protect them, even if it means working with Zev. Ilara looked up, her eyes meeting Mara's. But what if he's playing me, Mara? What if this is all a trap? Mara squeezed her hand. Then you'll be ready for it. You're stronger than you think, Ilara. And you're not alone. Ilara closed her eyes, drawing strength from Mara's words. She wasn't alone. She had her pack. She had Mara. Whether she liked it or not, she had Zev. And together, they would face whatever darkness was rising in the shadows. Unlikely alliance. A joint investigation. The pronouncement tasted like ash. Ilara scrutinized Zev, seeking any tell in his stance. He was a statue, the flickering firelight accentuating the fatigue carved into the corners of his eyes. The botched ritual had clearly ravaged him. He seemed vulnerable. Zev's jaw corded. And what compels you to think I'd entertain that, Ilara? After your accusations, after your pack all but raised a battle standard against us. Because, she shot back, closing the distance, the fragrance of evergreen and sod clinging to her cloak. If we don't, the question of war will be academic. This transcends Northwood versus Shadow Creek, Zev. Someone is deliberately inciting conflict, aiming to obliterate us both. Silence stretched, punctuated only by the fire's snap and a distant, mournful howl. Ilara held her breath, refusing to yield. The alternative was a chasm she dared not contemplate. At last, Zev exhaled slowly, deliberately. And you believe collaboration with you is the panacea? It's the only option offering a sliver of hope, Ilara countered. Unless you possess a superior plan? He didn't. His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly, a rare display of capitulation. Fine, he bit out, the word terse and reluctant, but on my terms. There are no my terms anymore, Ilara corrected, meeting his gaze head-on. We stand together, or we fall apart. She glimpsed something flicker in his eyes, perhaps regard, perhaps merely a recognition of their shared plight. The following dawn saw the genesis of an uneasy accord. Ilara, flanked by Mara and a select guard of her most loyal warriors, crossed into Northwood territory. Air vibrated with suspicion. A near-palpable miasma of distrust. Northwood sentinels, faces like granite, lined the border, their eyes tracking Ilara's every footfall. Zev greeted them at the tree line, his expression an inscrutable mask. Dressed in a simple leather jerkin, his sable hair drawn back, highlighting the austere angles of his face, he projected a contained force that both daunted and, she grudgingly admitted, captivated her. "Welcome to Northwood, Alpha Ilara," he greeted, his tone devoid of cordiality. "Let's proceed with this." Their initial destination was the site of Liam's assault. The earth remained blighted with blood, its metallic tang sharp in the air. Mara immediately immersed herself in the task, scrutinizing the surrounding trees for any trace of the attacker. Ilara, meanwhile, focused on the nature of Liam's injuries. "The incisions are too precise," she remarked, her gloved hand tracing a brutal score across a nearby trunk. "Not the work of feral beasts or uncontrolled shifters." Zev offered a grim affirmation. My trackers reached the same conclusion, but yielded no sign of human agency. "Perhaps not human," Mara interjected, her voice hushed. She held aloft a small metallic fragment. "But definitively not animal. Analyze the composition." Ilara examined it. It was alien obsidian dark and strangely burnished, possessed of an unnatural iridescence. "What is this?" "Unknown," Mara confessed. "But I intend to discover its origins." They progressed to the locations of the subsequent attacks, each site yielding similar evidence: surgically clean lacerations and pieces of the peculiar alloy. As they assembled the disparate threads, a chilling pattern materialized. "The assaults are escalating," Ilara stated, a furrow deepening between her brows. "Increasing in both frequency and ferocity, and directed at individuals critical to the stability of both our packs. Someone seeks to fracture us," Zev concluded, his tone grave. "But their identity and motives remain shrouded." The questions hung, unanswered, heavy in the charged atmosphere. As twilight descended, painting the forest floor with elongated shadows, Ilara and Zev found themselves momentarily isolated, distanced from their respective guards. "We must extend trust, Zev," Ilara declared, her voice low yet resolute. "If we are to quell this, We have to relinquish all secrets, information, resources, and suspicions. Zev hesitated, his gaze probing hers. Trust is not a readily offered commodity in my experience, Ilara. I am aware, she responded. However, we are bereft of alternatives. Our packs depend on us. He nodded slowly, his expression softening microscopically. Very well, he conceded. A fragile alliance, offered with caution. As they began to rejoin their assembled warriors, Ilara could not dispel the premonition that they were advancing into a carefully laid snare. Their adversary lurked, observant and patient, and their time dwindled inexorably. Back at Shadow Creek, Ilara was confronted by the predictable descent. Her pack bristled at the notion of cooperation with Northwood. Accusations flew like poisoned darts, and tempers flared. How can you place faith in him, Ilara? One warrior demanded, his tone barbed with animosity. He bears the mark of Northwood. They are all perfidious deceivers. I understand your sentiment, Ilara replied, her voice steady and firm. But ancient rivalries are now insignificant. Survival demands unity, division guarantees annihilation. Mara stood resolutely at her side, a silent bulwark of support. She recognized the sagacity of Ilara's course, irrespective of its unpopularity. We must grant her latitude, Mara urged, addressing the agitated throng. Ilara is our alpha. We must repose our confidence in her judgment. Slowly, grudgingly, the assembly began to quiet. While the alliance may have been unpalatable, they remained committed to Ilara's leadership. She held the mantle of alpha, and they entrusted their protection to her. That night, Ilara found herself besieged by sleeplessness. She roamed her chambers, her mind a tempest of uncertainties and misgivings. Was she navigating the correct course? Was she leading her pack toward a precipice? A gentle rap interrupted her reverie. She opened the door to find Mara, her face etched with concern. "Are you all right?" Mara inquired. "I am unsure," Ilara confessed. "I am beset by doubts. What if I misjudge Zev? What if he deceives me?" Mara placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your assessment is accurate, Ilara. I discern it in his eyes. He is as apprehensive as we, and equally driven to shield his own. But can we genuinely rely on him?" Ilara pressed. "We are compelled to," Mara asserted. "For the present, he represents our only recourse." Ilara met Mara's gaze, her heart swelling with gratitude. She could not conceive of navigating this crisis without her unwavering friendship. "Thank you, Mara," she said. "I needed that." Mara offered a faint smile. "Any time. Now, seek respite. A demanding day looms." Ilara nodded and closed the door. As she settled in her bed, thoughts of Zev preoccupied her. He was an enigma, a contradiction. He was her foe, yet also her sole source of succor. She harbored resentment, yet felt an inexplicable pull. One certainty prevailed. This alliance was destined to be more intricate than she had envisioned, and it would subject her to tests of resilience she could not have foreseen. But she was prepared. She was compelled to be. For the destiny of her pack, and perhaps the entirety of the werewolf realm, rested upon its success. The abandoned mine, a mournful cry of the wind, knifed through the bare branches as Ilara and Zev navigated the choked path. The cloying sweetness of decay and damp earth fought against the sharp, coppery scent that had drawn them. Every snap and rustle became a threat in the heavy quiet. Zev, usually unshakable, appeared diminished, the cost of his ill-advised foray into their bond now etched on his face as pallor and dark smudges under his eyes. He faltered, grabbing hold of a knotty root. "Careful," Ilara snapped, the word sharper than intended. She offered a hand, but he flinched, a flicker of discomfort in his gaze. "I'm fine," he muttered, righting himself. "Just lightheaded." Her frown deepened. Far from it. His pride only frayed her raw nerves further. "This is hardly the moment for stoicism, Zev. You strained the bond past its breaking point. Admit it." A muscle ticked in his jaw as he glared. "I made a mistake. Satisfied? Can we focus on the problem at hand?" She bit back the retort, the need to censure him warring with the mission's urgency. Rising tensions, a growing discord in both packs, demanded their full focus. A curt nod. "Fine, but don't expect any assistance if you collapse." The path vomited them into a clearing dominated by the gnarled mouth of the abandoned mine. Untended weeds and fallen debris nearly obscured the entrance, a silent testament to long neglect. A rusted sign, its warning barely visible, hinted at the dangers within. A shiver crawled down Ilara's spine, instinct screaming retreat. But she pressed onward, her fingers tightening around the knife at her hip. "Death clings to this place," she breathed, barely audible. Zev's gaze swept the perimeter. "And something else. Something tainted." They edged into the mine, senses heightened, trying to see through the gloom. The air chilled, thickened. The earthy reek augmented by the faintest whiff of sulfur. Water plinked from the ceiling, each drop amplified in the echoing void. Ilara raised a hand, halting Zev. "Tracks," she whispered, pointing to the muddy floor. "Fresh, multiple sets." Zev knelt, examining the imprints. Werewolf prints, and something smaller, lighter, possibly human. They followed the trail deeper, the tunnel coiling into the earth's gut. Only their breathing and the constant drip, drip, drip broke the silence. Abruptly, Ilara paused, nose twitching. "You smell that?" she asked, her voice tight. Zev inhaled deeply. Blood and ozone. The metallic tang intensified, nearly overpowering. They rounded a bend and froze. A large cavern revealed itself, illuminated by a sputtering lantern swinging from a beam. A disturbing tableau greeted them. The walls were defaced with crude symbols, twisted parodies of ancient werewolf runes. At the cavern's center, a haphazard table hosted maps, diagrams, and strange devices thrumming with a disturbing cadence. "What is this place?" Ilara breathed, eyes wide. Zev approached the table, his hand hovering over one of the devices. "Some kind of technology, unlike anything I've encountered." He picked up a map, brow furrowed. "This is a map of Shadow Creek territory and Northwood." Ilara joined him, tracing his gaze. Strategic points were highlighted, key infrastructure marked, troop deployments charted. "They're planning something," she stated, grimly. "Something significant." Zev seized another document, a handwritten letter, and started to read aloud. "The Alphas are blind to the truth. Their packs are flailing, fractured. With the correct trigger, we can spark a war that will purge this land and give rise to a new era." He stopped, meeting Ilara's gaze. "They're trying to instigate conflict between our packs." Anger surged, a hot betrayal. "Who are these people?" she demanded. "What is their aim?" Zev resumed reading. "The devices are almost complete. Modified sonic weaponry will spread discord, turning pack against pack. The Alphas will be forced to respond." He looked up, his face ashen. "Sonic weaponry? They're using technology to manipulate us, to sow division." A scraping sound echoed through the cavern. They spun, senses flaring. A hidden seam in the wall was splitting open, revealing a dark, narrow passage. "They're here," Ilara hissed, drawing her knife. Zev moved in front of her, eyes narrowed, muscles coiled. "Stay behind me." A figure materialized from the tunnel, swallowed by shadow. As it stepped into the light, Ilara recognized the face. It was Ronan, a disaffected member of her own pack, a notorious agitator with a reputation for defiance. Behind him stood other werewolves, their faces hard, eyes blazing with fanaticism. "Ronan," Ilara said, her voice glacial. "What is the meaning of this?" Ronan smirked, eyes gleaming with malice. "The meaning, Alpha? Your time is over. You're too weak, too blind to see the truth. We will purify this pack, this land, and forge a new order." "You're deluded," Ilara spat. "This is treachery." Ronan laughed. "Treachery? No, Alpha. This is revolution." He gestured to the others. "We are the future. And you, Alpha, are yesterday." Zev stepped forward, a growl rumbling in his chest. "This ends now, Ronan. Stand down." Ronan ignored him, his gaze locked on Ilara. "Join us, Ilara. Join us, and together we can usher in a better world." Ilara's heart hammered. She knew Ronan and his followers were dangerous, unpredictable. Yet, she couldn't yield. She was bound by duty to her pack, to her people. "I will never join you," she stated, her voice ringing with defiance. "I will fight you to my last breath." Ronan's smirk vanished, replaced by raw hatred. "So be it," he snarled. "Kill them." The renegade werewolves lunged, claws extended, eyes burning with bloodlust. The battle commenced. Ambush Ronan's laughter, a grating echo in the cavernous mine, ricocheted off the slick rock face. Each syllable a malicious barb aimed at Ilara's core. "You disappoint, Ilara. I believed you, above all others, would grasp the potential. The power we could wield united." Before she could respond, a bestial bellow ripped through the atmosphere. From the deepest recesses of the mine, a tide of werewolves surged forth, their eyes burning with predatory fervor. The air vibrated with anticipation, thick with the reek of stale earth and simmering rage. "Showtime," Zev croaked, his voice raspy. He teetered, his complexion ashen, but his gaze remained fixed on the encroaching threat. The silver restraints on his wrists caught the dim light, a stark reminder of his diminished strength. Ilara cursed under her breath. He was in no shape for this. "Stay behind me," she commanded, already mid-shift. Her bones creaked and remolded, her senses heightening as she assumed her lupine guise. A resonant growl vibrated from her chest, a promise of unleashed fury. But Zev defied her. He transformed as well, the process clearly arduous. Slower, his movements less graceful. Yet his inherent power remained palpable, radiating like the heat shimmer from a furnace. He stood alongside her, shoulder to shoulder, a silent vow of solidarity. The first wave of rogues crashed against them like a storm. Ilara launched herself, her fangs finding purchase in the flank of a snarling brute. She registered the sickening crack of bone as she tore free, sending the rogue sprawling. Beside her, Zev fought with honed precision, his claws rending flesh, his snarls mirroring her own. They stood back to back, a swirling tempest of fur and raw aggression. Ilara felt an odd surge of energy, a connection to Zev that transcended their imposed proximity. Their movements seemed intertwined, each anticipating the other's intentions, their combined strength enhanced by the bond that shackled them together. She intercepted a strike aimed at Zev's head. He felled a rogue that had attempted to outflank her. The bond, usually a source of friction, was now a weapon, a lifeline. The rogues were relentless, fueled by Ronin's warped ideology and the lure of amplified power. They pressed in on Ilara and Zev, an unyielding surge of claws and teeth. A searing pain bloomed on Ilara's side as a rogue managed to rake its claws across her ribs. She snarled, pivoting and snapping, forcing it back with a ferocious bite. Zev grunted as a rogue slammed into him, sending him staggering. He swiftly regained his footing, but Ilara could perceive the strain etched onto his face. The silver was sapping his strength, and the severance of the bond had taken its toll. He wouldn't last much longer. "Zev!" Ilara barked, her jaws snapping at an oncoming attacker. "Find cover. I can manage." "Not a chance," he retorted, his voice strained with agony. He surged forward, tackling a rogue poised to pounce on her. They tumbled across the rugged ground, a chaotic mass of fur and limbs. Ilara knew his assessment was accurate. She couldn't repel them alone, not for long. Yet, she couldn't allow him to be killed either. She concentrated her energy, channeling the force of the bond. It was a risky gamble, pushing the connection when it was already frayed, but desperation dictated her actions. She felt a jolt of energy surge through her, a sensation mirrored in Zev. He moved with revitalized intensity, his attacks quicker, more forceful. Ilara mirrored his movements, their combined might pushing back the rogue onslaught. They fought with fierce desperation, their bond a flickering torch in the oppressive darkness. Yet, the rogues were too numerous, their ranks seemingly inexhaustible. Ilara felt her stamina ebbing, her movements growing sluggish. She stumbled, almost falling, but Zev was there, his shoulder bracing against hers, preventing her collapse. Abruptly, a shrill whine pierced the chaos, a sound that reverberated deep within Ilara's very bones. The rogues faltered, their eyes widening with manic anticipation. Ronin stepped forward, clutching a bizarre device, a modified iteration of the sonic weapon they had unearthed. "Time to level the playing field," he declared, a malicious grin twisting his features. He aimed the device at Ilara and Zev, his finger poised over the activation switch. Ilara knew what was coming. The sonic weapon, amplified and altered, could shatter bones, scramble minds. It was engineered to break the resolve of even the most formidable werewolf. Before Ronin could engage the device, Zev moved with a swiftness that defied his weakened condition. He launched himself at Ronin, dislodging the device from his grasp. It clattered to the ground, the piercing whine abruptly extinguished. The rogues surged forward, shielding their leader. Ilara and Zev were encircled, outnumbered and outmatched. They were cornered. Then, a section of the mine wall disintegrated inward, showering the cavern with dust and pulverized rock. A pack of wolves, spearheaded by Ilara's beta Lyra, flooded into the mine, their eyes blazing with righteous fury. The scales had tipped. The arrival of Ilara's pack furnished them with the advantage they desperately needed. The rogues, caught unawares, wavered. Ilara and Zev, infused with adrenaline and the raw instinct to survive, fought with renewed ferocity. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the rogues were either subdued or had retreated into the labyrinthine tunnels. The mine fell silent, save for the ragged gasps of the survivors. Ilara shifted back to her human form, her body screaming in protest, her clothes tattered and stained with blood. She leaned against the mine wall, struggling to draw breath. Zev, still in his wolf form, collapsed beside her, his breathing shallow and labored. Lyra rushed to Ilara's side, her eyes etched with concern. "Ilara, are you harmed?" "I'll endure," Ilara managed, her voice raspy. She glanced at Zev, his dark fur matted with blood. "But he requires assistance." Lyra nodded, signaling to several other pack members. They gingerly coaxed Zev back into his human form and began to minister to his wounds. Ilara watched them, her heart weighed down with guilt. He had jeopardized his life for hers, despite their animosity. Ronan, trussed and gagged, was hauled before Ilara. His eyes smoldered with hatred, yet his defiance seemed muted. Ilara knelt before him, her gaze unwavering. "Why, Ronan? Why did you instigate this?" Ronan spat at her feet. "For a superior world, Ilara. A world where we are not enslaved by tradition, where we possess the autonomy to forge our own destiny. And that destiny necessitates initiating a war," Ilara inquired, her voice tinged with incredulity. "If such is the price," Ronan countered, his eyes hardening. Ilara shook her head, a profound melancholy washing over her. "You are a fool, Ronan. You have squandered everything for a fallacy." She stood up, turning her back on him. "Remove him," she instructed Lyra. "Imprison him. He will answer for his transgressions." As Ronan was escorted away, Ilara turned her attention back to Zev. He was now conscious, his eyes locking with hers. A flicker of something indecipherable danced within his gaze. Gratitude, respect, or perhaps something beyond. The forced union had thrown them into a crucible of fire and blood. They harbored animosity, yes, yet they had also fought as one, their lives bound together in a manner neither could have foreseen. Now, she found herself contemplating whether that union might yield something more profound than mere antagonism. A shield of loyalty, the mind throbbed with a feverish energy. Drifting dust, caught in the dimming circles of headlamps, highlighted the ferocious scowls of the remaining rogue wolves. Adrenaline hammered in Ilara's chest as she spun, a premonition prickling at her skin. She registered the flurry of movement as her packmates tightened their defenses, yet her gaze remained riveted on Torin. Perched atop a jutting section of the mine wall, his eyes burned with wild fervor, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Such admirable struggle," Torin's voice reverberated through the cavern, thick with derision. "But loyalty is a flaw, Ilara. A flaw I mean to shatter." He lifted a hand, and a deep thrum resonated throughout the mine, vibrating through Ilara's very core. A surge of untamed power radiated from Torin, distorting the air around him. Imminent peril tightened its grip. Before thought became action, a jolt of raw energy, spitting with ominous sparks, blasted from Torin's palm, zeroing in on her. It blurred, faster than any strike she'd witnessed, a torrent of malice. An icy spike of dread bypassed her honed instincts, paralyzing her. Then, a figure lunged into her path, a barricade of muscle and fur. Zev roared, a sound ripped from pain and defiance as the energy slammed into him. The force of the blow hurled him into Ilara, stealing the air from her lungs. She reeled, legs failing, and together they crashed to the rough stone floor. For a fleeting moment, chaos reigned, a confusion of noise and distorted shapes. The acrid tang of scorched fur and ozone stung her nostrils. Clearing her head, Ilara scrambled to her feet, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Zev lay beside her, his breathing shallow and ragged, his face twisted in agony. A dark bloom stained his flank, spreading like a dark tide across his fur. "Zev!" she cried, her voice a constricted thread of panic. She knelt, hands hovering over the wound, paralyzed by uncertainty. The pack bond vibrated, a dissonant chord of pain and terror. Stretched thin, it felt on the verge of snapping. "Ilara," Zev gasped, his eyes fluttering open. He reached for her, his hand finding hers, his grip surprisingly firm. "Are you unharmed?" His concern for her, amidst his own torment, hit her with staggering force. He'd shielded her. He'd taken the brunt of the attack. Why would he? "Don't speak," she choked out, her voice trembling despite her efforts. "Just stay still." She tore a strip from her tunic, pressing it hard against the wound, desperately trying to slow the flow of blood. The battle raged, the sounds of snapping teeth and furious snarls fading into a distant backdrop. Ilara was oblivious, her universe shrinking to encompass the figure bleeding in her arms. Taran Kar. Zev's voice was faint, but his eyes blazed with an inner fire. "He's stronger than before. Be careful." "I will," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. She locked onto his gaze, and for the first time, perceived not the arrogant alpha she thought she knew, but something altogether different. A vulnerability, a depth of care she hadn't imagined. The magnitude of his act crashed over her. He'd risked everything, sacrificed himself to defend her. A rush of gratitude, almost unbearable in its intensity, swept through her. She loathed him. She was meant to loathe him. But in this moment, amidst the bedlam and bathed in the sickly glow of the mine, she couldn't deny the truth. Something had fundamentally shifted. "Ilara." Liam's voice sliced through her daze, his face etched with worry. "We must get him out. The bonded is weakening fast." Liam and another pack member carefully hoisted Zev, supporting him between them. Ilara rose, her legs unsteady, her thoughts in turmoil. She cast a glance back at Torin, who regarded them with a self-satisfied smirk. "This isn't concluded, Ilara," he called out, his voice coated with venom. "It has barely commenced." Her gaze met his, hardening with sudden resolve. He might have injured Zev, he might have weakened the bond, but he hadn't broken her spirit. He'd underestimated her. He'd underestimated them both. "We shall see about that, Torin," she retorted, her voice resonating with newfound conviction. "We shall see." As they bore Zev from the mine, Ilara felt the bond, tenuous and strained, yet undeniably present. A tangible reminder of their connection, a bond forged in animosity, tempered by shared adversity, and now, by an act of sacrifice, irrevocably transformed. Healing touched the air hung thick with the sharp bite of blood, a metallic counterpoint to the subterranean earthiness of the mine. Ilara knelt beside Zev, her fingers trembling above the savage gash that bisected his flank. The violated flesh oozed sluggishly, a shocking pink against the backdrop of his sable fur. His breath came in ragged gasps, his face ashen with exertion and agony. A shard of ice pierced her simmering rage's stark terror. More than the fracturing bond, the sight of his exposed vulnerability churned her insides. "Damn you, Zev," she spat, her voice wavering despite her best efforts. "What possessed you to be so reckless?" A weak, crooked smile touched his lips, a flicker of agony dancing in his eyes. "Someone needed to shield our fiery alpha." Ilara snorted, a flush creeping up her neck. "Save the sweet talk. Conserve what you have for healing." With deliberate care, she summoned her internal power, focusing on the vital force humming within her. It was a familiar warmth, surging through her like molten gold, prickling at her extremities. Closing her eyes, she visualized the rent flesh mending, the severed vessels reconnecting. This was more than just pack healing. It was profoundly intimate, driven by an unacknowledged protectiveness. Magic surged from her, an iridescent emerald aura enveloping Zev's wound. He flinched, a stifled groan escaping him. "Ilara, it burns like fire." "It needs to," she retorted, her focus absolute. "Justy, stay still." She sensed the bond, frayed but unbroken, pulsing with his pain, his defenselessness, and something else, a raw, inescapable connection that resonated within her very core. It was disconcerting, a violation of the animosity she had so fiercely cultivated. This wasn't the plan. She should have been reveling in his discomfort, not consumed by a frantic need to restore him. Minutes blurred into an agonizing eternity as she channeled her essence into the healing. The air shimmered and crackled, the sharp, clean scent of ozone filling her lungs. Gradually, painstakingly, the wound began to knit itself closed. The jagged edges softened, the crimson tide ebbed, a nascent flesh bloomed to replace the damage. When she finally withdrew, depleted, only a pale, glistening scar remained. Zev lay still, his breathing deepening. He opened his eyes, fixing her with a gaze so intense it stole her breath. "Thank you," he rasped, his voice rough. Ilara looked away, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Don't mention it. I wouldn't want your pack holding me responsible for your idiocy." A soft chuckle vibrated from him, a sound that sent a strange tremor through her. "Ever the diplomat, aren't you?" She scrambled to her feet, putting precious distance between them. Suddenly, the mind felt suffocating, too private. "We need to leave. Torin might return." Zev struggled to sit upright, wincing with the effort. "I can manage." "Like hell you can," Ilara snapped, more harshly than intended. But thought of him pushing himself, risking further injury, was unbearable. "Lean on me." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. He draped an arm around her shoulders, his weight a surprising burden. The contact sent a jolt through her, a disorienting blend of aversion and something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously like solace. They stumbled through the inky tunnels, silence expanding between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Ilara could feel his breath ghosting against her neck, the furnace of his body radiating through her. She struggled to focus on their escape, but her thoughts kept spiraling back to the moment he'd stepped in front of Torin's attack. The sheer selflessness, the raw vulnerability it had fractured the carefully constructed wall around her heart. Reaching the entrance, they emerged into the cool embrace of the night. The surrounding forest loomed, dark and hushed, yet somehow less menacing than the suffocating darkness they had just left behind. Ilara helped Zev to lean against a gnarled tree, his face still etched with fatigue. "Stay here," she instructed. "I'll summon assistance." He reached out, his hand closing around her wrist. His touch was unexpectedly gentle, his fingers radiating warmth against her skin. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice deep and earnest. "Why did you heal me?" The question hung suspended in the air, laden with implications. She knew he wasn't just asking about the physical act. He was probing the shifting landscape of their relationship, the transformation in her feelings. Ilara swallowed, her gaze locked on their joined hands. I don't know," she stammered, the lie sounding hollow even to her own ears. He tilted his head, his eyes searching hers with an unnerving intensity. "Yes, you do. You simply don't want to admit it." She wrenched her hand free, turning away from his probing gaze. "Don't be absurd." Am I wrong? He questioned softly. Or are you finally beginning to see me as something other than your adversary? Alara remained silent, her mind a tempest of conflicting emotions. He was right, of course. Something had irrevocably changed. The hatred lingered, a familiar undercurrent, but it no longer held absolute sway. It was now intertwined with something else, something she couldn't comprehend and desperately didn't want to acknowledge. A grudging respect, a nascent attraction, and a terrifying sense of connection. The bond hummed faintly, a fragile thread linking them despite the inner turmoil. It served as a potent reminder of their unwanted union, of the fate they couldn't escape. But it also whispered of the unexpected strength they discovered in each other, the hidden depths veiled by animosity. She turned back to Zev, his eyes reflecting a complex blend of pain and hope. He was no longer simply the arrogant, exasperating alpha she had always known. He was something more, something intricate and exposed. And despite everything the animosity, the coerced bond, she couldn't deny the spark that flickered between them. A spark that threatened to erupt into something far more perilous than either of them could possibly imagine. United front, the return journey was agonizingly slow. Each league separating her from Zev felt like a turn of the screw in Alara's gut. She walled it off, her mind a steel trap focused on the daunting task ahead, opening her pack's eyes to the real threat lurking beyond Northwood. Shadow Creek greeted her with tentative anticipation. They had acutely felt her absence, that strange tether binding her to Zev, and the subsequent slackening of their communal strength. A knot of fear had been steadily tightening. She halted on the familiar crest overlooking her territory, the wind a tangible force through her hair, the evocative musk of pine and moist earth anchoring her. Below, her pack clustered, worry etched on their features. "We sensed why you left," Maya, her second, announced, stepping forward. "We felt him." Elora acknowledged this with a curt nod, jaw set. "I know. And what I must tell you will challenge everything you believe." She recounted the rogue incursions, the unnerving technology, the calculated mayhem designed to spark a war between them all. She displayed the salvaged device fragments, the cryptic data logs. A ripple of unease spread through the throng. Skepticism lingered, a stubborn undercurrent. Hearing tales of rogue attacks was one thing, accepting they were mere puppets in a grand, sinister design, quite another. Meanwhile, Zev faced his own gauntlet of disbelief. He entered the Northwood Pack Hall, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and ingrained authority. Elara's absence was a palpable void, an ache in his very soul. It sharpened his movements, shortened his fuse. Counselor Bram, a lean wolf with shrewd, assessing eyes, was the first to break the silence. "So, the illustrious Alpha Northwood returns, laden with tales of amity and technology? Courtesy of Shadow Creek, no less." Bram's tone was laced with derision. Zev slammed the data logs onto the massive oak table. The resounding boom echoed through the hall, quieting the restless murmurings. "This isn't a Shadow Creek gambit, Bram. The stakes are higher than pack rivalries. Rogue wolves, yes, but wielding advanced technology, manipulated into aggression." He presented the evidence. Coordinates of clandestine labs, energy signatures defying known wolf magic. He spoke of Elara's resolve, her fealty to her pack, her willingness to risk all to uncover the truth. Graham scoffed, a dismissive sound. "Risk all? Or orchestrate all?" "Meadowlight has always harbored ambition, Zev. Perhaps this is her elaborate power play." The insidious seed of doubt was sown, taking root in the wary eyes of his pack. Zev's fists clenched, the urge to shift and tear Bram limb from limb a fierce temptation. The bond pulsed, a sharp, insistent reminder of Ilara's presence, her strength of will, her unyielding devotion to her kin. He couldn't permit Bram to infect their minds with fallacy. Back at Shadow Creek, Ilara met comparable resistance. Some, like Maya, granted her unwavering faith. Others, their spirits wounded by years of skirmishes with Northwood, remained unconvinced. "How can we be certain this isn't a ruse, Ilara?" questioned Silas, a grizzled elder, his voice a gravelly rasp. "Northwood has always been the enemy." Ilara met his aged gaze, her own unflinching. "Because I witnessed it, Silas. I examined the technology. I felt the energy radiating from it, and I saw the fear in Northwood's gaze when he understood the implications." It chafed her to admit it, to grant Zev any form of recognition, but the truth was irrefutable. "This isn't about blindly trusting Northwood, it's about trusting my judgment, and trusting the evidence I bring before you." The atmosphere crackled with strain. Ilara understood the magnitude of her request, discarding years of ingrained animosity, placing faith in their alpha after her absence, her connection to their sworn enemy. It demanded a considerable leap of faith. She held her breath, awaiting their verdict. Within the Northwood Hall, contention raged. Bram's voice served as a persistent drone of suspicion, portraying Ilara as a Machiavellian schemer, and Zev as a naive fool bewitched by something Bram couldn't quite define, but hinted at with sinister implications. Zev listened, his restraint fraying. He knew he had to take decisive action, something that would shatter the deep-seated prejudice and force his pack to perceive the reality of the situation. He rose to his feet, his voice slicing through Bram's tirade. "Enough!" The word resonated through the hall, abruptly silencing all present. He met Bram's gaze head-on, his own unwavering. "I will not tolerate this character assassination of Ilara Meadowlight." He paused, inhaling deeply. This was the critical moment. He was about to gamble everything. "She is not our adversary. She is a leader, dedicated to protecting her own, mirroring my commitment to Northwood. And she speaks the truth." He stepped forward, his voice infused with conviction. "Furthermore," he declared, his voice ringing with finality, "I place my trust in her. I trust her discernment, her strength, and her unwavering commitment to extinguishing this threat." A collective intake of breath swept through the hall. Alphas did not extend public trust to their rivals, certainly not to Meadowlight. Such a thing was without precedent. Bram sputtered, his face coloring with rage. "You're being manipulated, Zev. This connection she holds over you, it's clouding your judgment." Zev ignored him, focusing on the faces of his brethren. He knew his words represented a gamble, a desperate bid to forge a unified front against a shared foe. But he needed to believe that reason, and the naked truth, could overcome years of ingrained hostility. He addressed his pack, his voice ringing with unwavering conviction. "We stand at a crossroads. We can cling to antiquated grudges, entrenched biases, and allow ourselves to be consumed. Or we can stand shoulder to shoulder, a united force against a threat that seeks to annihilate us." He paused, allowing his words to resonate. "I choose unity. I choose strength. I choose to stand in solidarity with Shadow Creek." A heavy silence descended. Then, gradually, hesitantly, affirmative nods began to appear. Some were made with visible reluctance, others with palpable apprehension, but they were there. Zev had planted the seed. It now fell to them to nurture it. He fixed his gaze upon Bram, his eyes carrying a stern warning. "Are you with us, counselor?" Bram hesitated, his face a mask of resentment. But he was, at heart, a politician, and possessed a keen awareness of when he was defeated. "For the welfare of the pack," he acceded, his voice taut. "I stand with you." A wave of relief washed over Zev. It wasn't a complete victory, but a vital first step. He had succeeded in persuading them, at least for the moment, to relinquish their differences and confront the true enemy. But he knew the path forward would be arduous and fraught with difficulties. He still needed to sway Ilara's pack, and he had yet to decipher the growing, undeniable magnetism that bound them together. The next step was clear: a cooperative investigation, a synchronized endeavor to locate the rogue wolves and dismantle their illicit operations. But first and foremost, he craved communication with Ilara. He needed the solace of her voice, to sense her presence, even fleetingly. The bond throbbed incessantly, a persistent reminder of their unwilling connection, a connection whose existence was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. He couldn't foresee the future, but one thing resonated with certainty: their destinies, and the destinies of their respective packs, were now irrevocably intertwined. The prophecy revealed a tentative peace draped over the conjoined packs of Shadow Creek and Northwood. The last wolves, liberated from the technological intrusion, were slowly being absorbed, a delicate dance across the minefield of suspicion. Before them stood Ilara and Zev, two halves of a whole forged in crisis and necessity. The air hummed, not only with fading magic, but with the potential energy of futures yet unwritten. "Shadow Creek, Northwood," Ilara began, her voice resonant despite the lingering tremors that sometimes claimed her. The memories of battles, the sting of treachery, remained vivid. "We faced a shared adversary, one who aimed to fracture us, to weaponize our differences. They were defeated." Zev advanced, his gaze encompassing the assembled wolves. He seemed drained, Ilara noted, the lines around his eyes more pronounced, his silver streaks more prominent. The bond, she understood, had exacted its price. "We stand unified," he proclaimed, his tone imbued with newfound resolve. "No longer disparate packs, but a single entity. We will cultivate trust, demonstrate respect, and offer mutual defense. This is not a mere cessation of hostilities, but a solemn pledge." Unease lingered, a palpable weight. Old wounds festered, and ancestral scars ran deep. Yet, in the eyes of the younger wolves, Ilara detected a spark of optimism, a yearning for a future divorced from the endless cycle of animosity. With the formal declaration concluded, the packs gradually dissolved into hushed conversations. Ilara sensed Zev's nearness, a reassuring anchor in the sudden quiet. She turned to him, her expression inscrutable. "It will require patience," she murmured. "I know," he responded, his eyes locking with hers. "But we have patience. And we have each other." The simple words hung suspended, laden with undertones extending beyond their political accord. Ilara felt a familiar tremor within, a sensation she'd long misattributed to mere antagonism, to their perpetual clashes. Now, she suspected it might be something altogether different. Later, as the moon painted the forest floor with long shadows, Zev sought her out. Ilara stood at the border of Shadow Creek territory, inhaling the scents of pine and damp earth. He approached with a measured gait, as if wary of startling a wild creature. "Ilara," he called, his voice soft. She pivoted, her eyes searching his. Zev? What is it? He hesitated, his jaw tight with an unspoken burden. There is something I must tell you, something long overdue. A knot of foreboding tightened in Ilara's stomach. What is it? She repeated, her voice barely audible. Zev inhaled deeply. Before we even met, before that disastrous first encounter, I knew about the prophecy. Ilara stared, her thoughts in disarray. The prophecy. A whispered fable, dismissed as mere superstition, that told of two alphas, adversaries by fate, linked by magic, destined to either preserve or obliterate their world. You knew, she whispered, disbelief lacing her tone. You knew all along? He nodded, his gaze pinned to the earth. My grandmother, the former Alpha of Northwood, informed me. She concealed it for years, fearing the ramifications. But on her deathbed, she confessed. She said our pack's future hinged upon it. And you kept this from me. Ilara's voice sharpened, anger simmering beneath the surface. You allowed me to believe you let us all believe ye. I was afraid, Zev confessed, his voice raw with remorse. Afraid of the prophecy itself, of the weight it placed upon us. Afraid of you, Ilara, of your intensity, your resolve. I didn't know how you'd react, so I tried to steer events. Ilara's eyes narrowed. Steer? What do you mean? Our initial encounter, it wasn't entirely a coincidence, he admitted, his face flushing with shame. I engineered it. I sought to ascertain if the prophecy held merit, if there was any connection between us. Fury surged through Ilara, scalding and complete. She advanced, her fists clenching. You exploited me. You exploited us. All this time, our antagonism, our strife, it was all a calculated move? No, Zev cried, reaching out to clasp her arm. It wasn't a game, Ilara. I erred. I concede that. Profoundly. But my intent was never to harm you. I was merely desperate. I witnessed the growing agitation among the rogue wolves, the murmurs of conflict. I reasoned that if the prophecy were genuine, if we were truly tethered, then perhaps, just perhaps, we could avert it. Ilara wrenched her arm free, her eyes blazing. And what of the bond? Did you manipulate that as well? Zev's silence supplied the answer. You experimented on us? She whispered, her voice trembling with rage. You treated us like subjects in a laboratory? I needed to comprehend it, he stammered. To harness it. I believed that by deciphering the bond, I could master the prophecy. I could safeguard our packs. Instead, you nearly annihilated them. Ilara spat, her voice laced with venom. Your hubris, your machinations nearly destroyed everything. Zev lowered his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I'm aware, he said softly. I'm aware. I have made numerous errors, Ilara, and I don't anticipate your forgiveness. A lengthy silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Ilara struggled to control her rage, to process the revelations that had just been thrust upon her. She had harbored hatred for Zev for so long, had blamed him for every misfortune that had befallen their packs. Now, she was compelled to acknowledge the possibility that he had been operating from fear, from a misplaced sense of responsibility. Why are you confiding in me now? She asked finally, her voice devoid of warmth. Zev looked up, his eyes pleading. Because I can no longer bear to keep it concealed, he said, his voice heavy with emotion. Because I I need you to know the truth. And because I'm in love with you, Ilara." The words lingered, unfathomable, absurd, yet undeniably genuine. Ilara stared, her heart hammering. Love? For Zev? The individual she had loathed for as long as she could recall. "That's impossible," she whispered, shaking her head. "You cannot be in love with me." "But I am," Zev insisted, moving closer. "I have been for some time. I attempted to deny it, to resist it, but the bond it only intensified my emotions. Every shared moment, every dispute, every confrontation only served to solidify how deeply I care for you." Ilara felt a peculiar warmth blossoming within, a sensation that both frightened and intrigued her. She had consistently perceived Zev as her adversary, as an impediment to her own ambitions. But now, she was beginning to perceive him anew, to discern the strength, the vulnerability he concealed beneath his arrogant veneer. "I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice barely audible. Zev reached out and gently took her hand. His touch sent a jolt coursing through her, a surge that weakened her knees. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "Just let me demonstrate." He leaned in, his focus solely on her lips. Ilara's heart hammered, her breath catching. She had envisioned this moment countless times, in dreams, in fantasies. But she had always envisioned it as a contest, a battle for dominance. Now, it felt wholly different. As Zev's lips met hers, Ilara felt consumed by a wave of raw sensation. It was a kiss of vulnerability, of surrender, of a connection that defied their animosity, their disparities, their past. It was a kiss that hinted at a shared fate, of a love that had lay dormant, waiting for expression. When they parted, Ilara was breathless. She peered up at Zev, her eyes reflecting a mixture of uncertainty, ardor, and yes, even a glimmer of hope. "I hated you," she whispered, her voice raw. Zev smiled ruefully. "I know. I hated you intensely," she repeated, her voice gaining strength. "But maybe that's because I felt afraid." "Afraid of what?" he asked softly. "Afraid of how much I was actually drawn to you," Ilara confessed, her cheeks flushing. "Afraid of the authority you held over me, of the emotions you stirred within me. It felt easier to loathe you than to concede that I might actually care." Zev's eyes widened, then softened with understanding. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice filled with tenderness. "You have nothing to be afraid of. I'm not going anywhere." He leaned in and kissed her again. A deeper, more fervent kiss, sealing their bond, their commitment, their newfound love. As they stood entwined beneath the moonlit canopy, Ilara recognized their journey was far from complete. But she also knew that they were no longer alone. They possessed each other, and together they could confront any challenge.